Hey, Coach. Good morning. Um, just getting a chance to talk to Teven last night for the first time. He certainly seems like a fiery guy. I'm just curious what he brought to your program, even off the field, but also within games with just his style of play.
Tevin is very interesting. I think he's just scratching the surface on his ability. He came from Topeka, Kansas, as you guys know, and when he arrived, I don't think he had any idea what college football was like. And just in the last year, he's finally developed some toughness and some grit that will certainly benefit him playing in the NFL. I would not be surprised in 2 years if people are looking back and saying that he is potentially the best offensive line take in this draft. And I say that because he has phenomenal athleticism, strength. He's highly intelligent, and he's just started to really get into football over the last 18 months. Now, I know that sounds funny, but when you're as gifted and talented as he is, with he's just developed over the last 18 months. So he really brought that to our program just recently. I used to joke with Teven when we were in the weight room, and there'd be 60 or 80 players in there and a coaching staff, and I would ask him, I said, Teven, there's one guy in this room that could be worth $30 or $40 million someday. And he would look at me and I would say, do you know who that is? And he would say no. And I said, it's you, Teven. That's who it could be. So I think that you guys are going to be shocked with what you're going to have in a couple years.
Colleen Kane, Chicago Tribune.
Hey, Coach, I was just wondering, what were some of the most impressive performances you've seen him put in? I know people talk about the Texas game a lot. So what stood out in that game, and maybe any others that stood out to you?
Again, I go back to what I said. When Teven was focused and into it and wanted to dominate, other players who were good, other good pass rushers, they couldn't get to our quarterback. I've seen him take off in practice when he gets fired up, and we run a screen play where the linemen are blocking downfield. He'll chase a corner or a safety all the way down the field, 30 or 40 yards, and stay in a good athletic position and knock them on the ground. So anytime that he wanted to play really well and dominate, and I think as he's matured mentally over the last year, that he can play at a really high level.
Mark Potash, Chicago Sun-Times.
Hey, Mike, along those lines, both Teven and Ryan Pace referenced the Texas game last year as the moment where Teven said that he felt he was convinced he was an NFL player. Was there anything that about that game that you recall, any way to quantify his performance or explain just why that was such a huge game for him?
Our offensive staff, particularly our line coach, challenged him with the personnel that he was facing against Texas. And we knew that in order for us to be successful offensively, that he had to hold his own on the edge, and he did. Essentially, his guys didn't make any plays at all. And Teven's an interesting young man. And at that point, you look at him and you say, it took that long for you to realize that you were a special talent. And it really did with him, because he had such a laid back personality. And I don't think he ever saw himself being that good of a football player. That's why I'm saying within the next couple of years, the NFL is going to be really shocked at what you have. Because when we asked him and challenged him to be as good as he could be and dominate a player, we had a lot of success with him on those days.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Johns, The Athletic.
Hey, Mike, thanks for doing this. A lot of times you hear prospects kind of, fired up that they were passed over in the draft, especially if they last passed the first round. But hearing Teven last night, it felt more real, more genuine, that he was actually legitimately angry that he lasted into the second round. Knowing what you know about him, like, what type of motivation will that become for him? Like, how will he channel that anger? Yeah, I think he used the term "rue the day." Like, the 32 teams that passed up on him will rue the day that they did.
Well, I hope that's true for him, and that I hate to go back to what I said about Teven, as you guys get to know him and the staff there in Chicago gets to know him, he has to be challenged mentally. And hopefully, I missed his interview. My son had a baseball game last night, so I didn't see any of that. But if that's challenging him mentally based on being passed over by other teams, and he uses that to his advantage, that's going to really benefit the Chicago Bears.
Hub Arkush, Pro Football Weekly.
Mike, thanks for helping us out. I'm kind of fascinated now because talking to him yesterday in that interview, he sounded like a young man who was born biting the heads off rattlesnakes. And yet you say that's all kind of new in the last year and a half. What do you think changed? What have you observed that now he's suddenly so nasty?
I've been in college football for 31 years, and I've seen players who don't see themselves playing at the highest level that they can. Certainly as coaches and media, we see different skill sets that make us aware of, hey, this young man, no matter what his position is, he's got a real chance. And I don't know that Teven ever saw himself that way. I think he started feeling it a couple years ago. And then particularly just within the last year, because of agents and people trying to get in touch with him, showing that he has the ability to play at this level. So I've joked with Teven for years, but he made that transition in the last 12 months, in my opinion. And we've told him, Kevin, this is what it's going to take. Guys that are at the level that you're trying to get to, they're trying to feed their families. I mean, they're not just college kids out there on scholarship, and you're going to have to change your mental approach. And I think that he's making that change. He's not there yet. But as that staff there in Chicago learns to really push him, he has a freakish ability. We had a first-round pick, Russell Okung. Gosh, I bet it's been 12 years ago now. I think he was the 6th player picked in the draft, and he's been in the league for, 10 or 12 years for Seattle, been tremendously successful. I think he's with the Chargers now. Teven is more talented than him, in my opinion. He just hasn't scratched that surface yet.
Mike, quick follow-up if I could. Also, a lot of the scouting reports indicated that he really was a prototypical right tackle, but he said he can go either side. And the Bears talked last night about seeing him on either side. Do you have a preference for him on the right or the left side?
Again, I'm going to go back to he's so talented athletically below the hips that I can't imagine they couldn't train him either way. Now, I've never coached in the NFL, so I don't want to overstep my boundaries. But, when you guys get to watch him in practice and in training and see his athleticism, I think you're going to see that he could play on either side of the ball.
Pat Finley, Chicago Sun-Times.
Hey, Mike, you've said a couple of different times, he's an interesting guy. What about him off the field or what about his personality has grabbed you? Because it does seem like he's not your usual football player.
Teven is very, very intellectual. Not that football players can't be intellectual, but he's not a big partier. He's low key, never missed classes. We never had issues with him. He was always on time, showed up everywhere. If you didn't see him, if you just saw a mugshot of him, he looks like he's going to engineering class. But when you see him physically, obviously 6'6", 320 or whatever he is, I don't know exact sizes, but he's had pretty much the same girlfriend for 3 or 4 years. And he's just real low key. And that's why I go back to, as he gets comfortable and these guys push him in a big way, he's going to train. He eats food. He eats right. He takes care of his body, doesn't abuse his body. And he's just different than a lot of very ego-driven athletes at our level and even in the NFL. I've been doing it for 31 years. Most of them are that way. Teven is not that way.
We're going to take a couple more for Coach. Alex Shapiro, NBC Sports Chicago.
Hey, Mike. Once Teven did develop that grit that you talk about, did you notice, was it infectious in the huddle? Did that spread to his teammates? What kind of energy did that do for the rest of the offensive line?
There's There's no question about it. And we talked to Teven about that the other linemen watch him. And when he would get really fiery and start to dominate in practice or in games, the other guys started playing better around him, which is natural. So once he gets going, and I really believe he will at your level, once he gets going, you're going to see a guy that's really, really talented and can make plays. Now, I'm guessing, based on not ever coaching in the NFL, that when he gets into training camp, there's going to be some of those rush ins throw him around a little bit. I think Chicago's still got one that can rush the passer pretty good, and they might sling him around, slap his head a little bit. But here's what'll happen. He'll eventually learn that he has to fight back. And when he has to fight back, he has a physical, uncanny presence that will allow him to be successful.
Sean Hammond, Pro Football Weekly.
Hey, Mike. Teven mentioned last night just sharing that draft moment with his dad. And I know he's a guy who lost his mom at an early age. Do you get a sense of how much, his family drives him through all this to see out his football career?
Well, you're in Topeka, Kansas, Midwest, very laid back environment. They lost mom, and he and dad became very close. And I know that I visited with his dad 2 or 3 weeks ago when he was on campus, and it's a very emotional time for he and Teven. And it's why we're all in this business as coaches, is to see these times when the young men can work through and have tremendous success. And I know Teven and his dad are just head over heels over the success he's having at this point.
We're going to do one more. Adam Hogue, NBC Sports.
Yeah, Mike, so as he goes through this rise and is kind of figuring himself out and all of a sudden is getting this attention in the NFL, what kind of conversations did you have with him, I guess, during the middle of the season when he decides to opt out and turn his attention towards the draft?
Well, we always want them to do what they think is best for their career. When he decided to miss the last few games, did I wish he would have played? Sure. We were a lot better offensive football team when he played. We're in a time and a society now where those decisions are going to be made. In my opinion, there's tremendous pressure by agents and people that have a future with these athletes beyond college football. So we do everything we can to help them and get them in that position. I don't think any of us will ever know if opting out for a certain number of games at the end of your junior or senior year hurts a player in the draft. I think that would be something you would have to ask the owners, general managers, teams that are doing the drafting. I wish he would have played all the way through, but when he decides to do that, we support him and we hope the best for him. And that's what we did last season.
Thanks, Coach.
I think we're all set with questions from Chicago. Truly appreciate the time this morning, Coach. Thank you very much.
You guys. All right, guys, anytime. Y'all have a good one.